Hello, everybody, and welcome to our next web panel discussion, our Insider Conversations. And I'm really, really happy with our panel tonight. And while the intro was playing, we were joined by our fourth panelist, literally making it by the skin of his teeth. So really, really great to have you with us as well, Warren. What a great group of guys today. It was interesting because last week we spoke a lot about women in ballet. But I think tonight we touch on so many different aspects in our insider conversations. And let's first just say good evening to our three panelists. First from New York, Warren Adams. Hi, Warren.
Hi, how are you, everyone? How's everyone?
Very, very well, and much better for seeing you.
I apologize. I was running back to back, and then I've got kids, so I got to get I got to make sure that they're fed and settled, and before I can speak to you, lovely people.
Absolutely, and that's something we spoke of last week. Is that so often people ask the ladies, how do you balance family and work, and they never ask the husbands, and so often the husbands are as involved, and sometimes in my case I'm the single dad, so I had to make sure as well my son is fed and taken care of before I could come and do this. So thank you for being here, and your new family, they're such a beautiful two kids, lovely.
Thank you.
So also we have Casey Hurd. He's living in Amsterdam, one of my favorite cities in the world, but he's not from Amsterdam originally. Hi, Casey.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. And then last but certainly not least, Mtutuzeli November. Hi, Mtutuzeli, all the way from London.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. This is so wonderful. Nice to see you, Warren. It's been so long.
Hey, brother, good to see you too.
I have such a big smile because I'm like seeing you, and I'm like,
well,
hey.
You were a baby when I last saw you, and now you're grown up and blown up. So I'm excited.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Perfect, perfect. Warren, can you please turn up your sound a little bit when you're speaking, or speak closer to the microphone? It's a little bit soft when you're speaking.
Okay.
I'm sitting literally in my car in the bush because it's school holidays and I took my son away, and we have no Wi-Fi connectivity where I'm staying. So I'm sitting down at the bottom of the bush outside the manager's house using his Wi-Fi. So please bear with me in this situation. But this is what we do. This is really what I want us to talk about, is how do we keep on going? How do we create when some people say it's not going to work? How do we keep on going? So that's really one of the things. And entrepreneurship I mentioned earlier when I spoke to the other two gentlemen, Warren. And for me, that is what you epitomize. It is, you have just gone from strength to strength to strength. So let's start with you. And I met you in 1990 in Port Elizabeth in the youth ballet, The Bluebird of Happiness, staged by one of my absolute favorite people, Dudley Tomlinson. Absolutely. And he's had so many people that he has impacted on. And so that's when I met you. And from then, you just flew. You literally never stopped, just went from strength to strength. So fill us in a little bit. And I always say to people, we know who you are and what you are, but many of the people watching and listening have no idea. So start and speak to us as if it's the first time you're telling us who you are. And I'm sure Casey would like to know more about you. Giselle has always known about you. So let's go.
Well, I actually thank you. I want to pick up. Can you hear me well now?
Yes, thank you very
Yeah.
much.
I want to pick up where you kind of just left off. I think 1990. I started with Dudley Tomlinson in the Youth Ballet in the mid '80s as a young boy, and it 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 taught me a lot. It was a lot of great groundwork. I come from one of the smallest big cities in South Africa, Port Elizabeth, and so I feel like Port Elizabeth always has been overlooked for a lot of opportunities, and I think what that program, one could call it the Port Elizabeth Youth Ballet, where professionals from Cape Town, like yourself at the time, would come and we will all be working together on making this production, taking a morning class. Like to me, it was my first opportunity of seeing what a professional works like. Um, you said I've been flying, flying, flying. There was a lot of crawling that happened, a lot of running, and that is still very much the case. In fact, my production company is called the Walk, Run, Fly, and it's based on this idea that we all have to go through those things in order to really understand how to truly appreciate the culmination of something you've built. Um, I think success is problematic in that people only pay attention when that happens versus the steps that are taken to create success. Um, and then to your point earlier of just like, this thing that we're in right now, this pandemic, and how, particularly as artists, I watch, you know, Tutuzelli do his thing every day on social media and finding ways of getting to express himself and making work, even in the fine construct of just his apartment. I look, it's problematic, but I also think is we have to look at this as a isolated moment in time. And it is very difficult to go to the darkest place being like, this is the end. This is the end of art as we know it, the end of dance, the end of theater. And for me, I actually have to look at the entire bubble of how we got here, right? Being that art has always been around and it will always continue to be around. The question is, how are we going to come back from it? And I know people have used the words, we want to get back to normal. And very early on, I said, I don't want to get back to normal because normal was not good. Normal was not equitable. Normal was not inviting to everyone. And so there's this idea of, especially in the United States, where we're dealing with the issue of race and equity, or the inequity of race, really, is I think what was the difference between George Floyd and everyone else before? Because certainly it's been caught on camera. And I do feel like COVID played a big part, is that everyone was forced to stop and really just look around and look and say, is this the world that we want to live in? And I can speak as an artist, I can say that, no, it's not. It's not equitable that the artists that are getting hired at the highest level, when it comes to Black or BIPOC, make up less than 1%. The way that the entire management executive ecosystem has been designed, it's not equitable. The way that money is given to certain organizations versus others, it is not equitable. So I think for me, the exciting part of this moment of just stopping is watching how we recalibrate and how we are going to go back and not try to go back to what we termed as normal, because normal, for one, and I think three of us on this call grew up in a South Africa that was not equitable, went through a transition, and is now dealing with inequities once more, be it from a different point of view. So I think we are very wary of that. And so for me, I'm actually looking forward to, once there is a vaccine, what that's going to mean for the art community.
I think it's a very, very important question. And we will definitely talk more about that, because the sad thing for me is 2 years ago, I think was the first time I met Casey or got to speak to Casey in Amsterdam, is that I had to travel to Amsterdam to have a conversation around inclusivity. And I kind of felt it's so wrong. It's so completely, I mean, in South Africa, where we have lost so many young Black dancers to the rest of the world, and we are not doing enough. And maybe somebody like myself is at fault in many ways, because I don't know, maybe we are not doing things to make it more accessible. I always say maybe our language, and I'm not talking about English or Afrikaans or Sotho or Xhosa, maybe just the way that we are saying things are not making it okay for people to want to be part of it. Um, Maybe we are indeed putting things there without knowing that we are putting things there. And so this is why tonight's conversation in particular is very important for me, with having both you and Mthutuzela with us, because you are the people that need to be taking it to the next level in South Africa and outside of South Africa. And I think that's very, very important. You know, if you think of a company like Stuttgart Ballet, started or made into something really spectacular by John Cranko, a South African, that's what South Africans can do, and that's what people need to do, and that's what we need to start thinking so differently about how we position what it is that we are doing. I've just become part of a research project where we are wanting to reintroduce, I think, in many ways, performing arts training in the normal B.Ed, the normal basic education, or bachelor's of education, but basic education training of the teacher. That's a math teacher, a science teacher, Afrikaans or English, Zulu, Xhosa teacher, not the arts teacher. The arts teacher is already part of our world. It's the rest of the people. If a little Warren or little Mthutuzela comes to the teacher in a remote place and says, I want to do ballet, or I want to dance, or I want to make music, or I want to do pansula, the first question shouldn't be, oh, how are you going to make a living? No, it should be, how do I help you realize your dream? How do I make it happen? And so that really is, I think, these important questions that we need to talk about. So, Casey, let's throw you into the mix. Completely different background, completely different everything. First, tell us where you come from, what you have done, where you've danced, and then let's start looking at some of the things that Warren had spoken about.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how different. I mean, of course, there's differences when you look at different cultures and people from different sides of the planet. There's a lot of differences. So yeah, I mean, I'm originally from the United States. I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah. You know, I always felt a little bit like growing up in a city, kind of, yeah, what I thought at the time was just a small little city off in the desert, way far away from the rest of the planet. I think in that respect, I feel like I feel very similar to a lot of people. I actually feel nowadays that I'm actually in the majority. I didn't realize when I was a kid, when I was feeling so far away from the rest of the world, that actually the majority of the people on this in the ballet and dance world come from outside the major cities like New York, Paris, London, stuff like that. So in some ways, I come from a very different background, just because I come from a certain part of the planet with its own culture and its own style of everything like that. But in other ways, I feel very very similar to everybody else, given the fact that I come from this sort of area outside of the dance world, very far outside of the dance world, and yet I felt this connection with this big community that is the ballet and dance world. So yeah, I'm originally from Salt Lake City, Utah. I grew up there. I studied in Washington, D.C. for a little while. I started dancing professionally with American Ballet Theater in New York City. I danced with Pacific Northwest Ballet for a little while in Seattle, and then eventually I became a principal dancer with the Dutch National Ballet here in Amsterdam. And I retired about 4 years ago, and that after retiring from dance, I sort of went a little bit back to my roots, remembering how it felt to feel like I'm so far away from the rest of the planet, like I'm so isolated and sort of way out on the outside. And I remembered that feeling, and I just felt, I love to travel a lot. I'm really interested in exploring different people's cultures and different ideas, and just learning about all the different points of view on everything that you can learn about from just visiting people in different, that come from very different backgrounds from yourself. So yeah, it just sort of inspired me to create a project that was all about inclusivity and bringing people that feel like they're on the periphery into the community, and creating this community that says, hey, we're all human. We all love freedom of expression. We all love to dance, and let's all be together and celebrate this thing together. And that was what led me to create my current project, Ballet Rising, just to create a truly global community that really represents everybody, regardless of your race, regardless of your religion, regardless of what area of the planet you're on, that everyone belongs, everyone should belong, and there's a place for you, and we're one big community. So let's celebrate dance, art, and freedom of expression.
Excellent. Mthutuzela, let's talk to you. Let's hear your journey first. I think Lauga has a beautiful photo in, I think it was 2014. Did you take part in the competition 2014, where you got the gold medal for your contemporary dance? And then there's also in the photo you creating. And I just always think of you with your big, beautiful smile, and just the mind is what is interesting to me. So talk to us, sir.
So I'm from Zolani, which is a tiny town, township just outside of Cape Town, about 200 kilometers. And I used to do kwaito when I was young. I used to dance in the streets, and people would just throw me little coins while I was dancing. But I never did it for the fact that people could throw the coins at me while I was dancing. I just always loved expressing myself, you know. And so yeah, I used to dance kwaito and African dance, and I used to play football / soccer, depending where you're from. And at the age of 15, I was then slowly introduced to ballet. And I think the way I was introduced to ballet was probably one of the best ways to introduce somebody to an art form that they have no idea about. Because when I first met Fiona, who was my teacher at the time, she was very intrigued by my name, because when you shorten it, it's Mtutu. And she was an English lady, and all she heard was Tutu. So in her head, she immediately thought that because my name is Tutu, like the ballet tutu, I was made to be a ballet dancer. So that was her fascination with me. And then she said to me that she wants to see me do some kwaito moves, because she's heard around the community that I like to wiggle around and dance. So I danced for her, and she had this idea that she wants to fuse ballet and kwaito together, and could I please teach the kids a little kwaito phrase? So I was like, okay, I mean, I don't mind teaching the kids. I love them. So I taught the kids a little phrase, and she put some ballet steps in between. But because the kids were so tiny, they had a hard time picking up the choreography. And so I kept on helping them. And in the process of helping them, I started to learn a bit of ballet as well. And by wanting to help the kids remember my choreography, it just sort of became a routine that I kept on going back to rehearsal / ballet class. And now I'm here, and that's like the most simplest way I can tell my story. But I think
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Well, I think what's amazing about that is Fiona didn't throw the ballet technique, the ballet art form at my face. She wanted to know what I was about first. And I think for me, that is such a beautiful approach, because especially growing up in the township around Black people, they only know ballet as an art form for white people, you know. And so when you are introduced to this thing that you have no idea what it is, but the approach is for you to feel at home, it's being brought to you, you're not going to it. And I think that changed my mind, and how I was thinking about what ballet is and what ballet could possibly do for me. Yeah, I'll try not to speak too much.
No, you're very welcome to speak. So please, I'm the one that normally speaks too much. What is quite interesting with Warren and with Mthutuzela is that both of you have brothers that are also in the theater world are also dancers. And Mthutuzela, you go one step further. You have a cousin, Aviwa, that also is in dance world and has actually performed for me with Mzansi Ballet. So that's wonderful for me as well. And I'm seeing one of the moms in South Africa, Gail Jacobs, whom I think is wonderful in the sense that she is doing everything to support her son in his journey of becoming the best possible dancer that he can be. And I think that's something that I think family is so important in this whole process. And whether it's a mother or a father or an extended family in some way, but family is what in the end makes it happen, I think, for so many young dancers. Um, so Gail, please keep on doing what you're doing for Naveen. Keep on supporting him. It also reminds me of so many people wanting to have questions. So if you have questions, please send them in. We will deal with them. But let's start talking, because I think, Tutu, you are taking something that is important, which is something that I spoke of just now, which is something that Warren was starting to talk about, and Casey, is the accessibility or the repackaging of ballet in a way that makes it more accessible to all, which is quite interesting, because for a number of years in South Africa, I said to people, I don't care what you wear, I don't care what you look like, as long as you come to the theater. And that didn't take away the sense of fear or discomfort that some people had about entering a theater. And it's something that many of us take for granted, because we were lucky to grow up in a theater. I didn't. I went to a theater for the first time in my life when I was 16 or 17. But it was okay to go to theater. For many people, it wasn't okay to theater. And as a matter of fact, many people couldn't even get to theater. I don't know what the situation is in Utah. I know that there's Ballet West, and I know that the people have done a great job there, Casey.
Okay.
But let's go first to Warren, and see, Warren, if you were running a ballet company in Joburg today, or in Cape Town, if you worked with Debbie or Esther or whoever, what is it that you would like to do differently immediately to make it easier for people to get into the theater?
Tear the doors down, literally and figuratively, because I was in a talk this morning, actually, where the discussion was this idea of, and I can just speak to America because this is where I live now, is like, why are there not more Black people coming to see, theater or dance or opera? And people's immediate reaction to that is, oh, the content. That the content should be more, urban or more. So I'm going to preface it by saying I do think that content has to be addressed. I think that people are attracted to things that they can, that they identify with in a very immediate way. But I also think that that is the cop out, right? I think the biggest elephant in the room is what we refer to as white spaces, and white spaces being, as somebody who lived like you, Dirk, in the most interesting time in South Africa, which was living in apartheid and then the transition, right? Is white spaces is actual the construct of how the building is run, right? So as a Black artist today, when I walk into a building and they're doing work of mine, I see that the managing director is white, the artistic director is white, all the marketing team is white, the stage managers are white, everyone's white. And so now you think you bring in a 12-year-old Black kid and you go, come do this thing in the space. There's an immediate sense of judgment. There's an immediate sense of, how do you go home? Who's picking you up? What taxi are you taking? I remember as a child that really stuck with me. I mean, stories like we're getting ready to do a photo shoot in the foyer of the Port Elizabeth Opera House, and the photographer for a newspaper comes, and Dudley Tomlinson had lined us up, set us up for this picture all morning, and I see him go over and he whispers in his ear, and Dudley looks at all of us and he goes, "Photo shoot over." And we're like, "But we didn't take the picture." And he goes, "It's over." Only to come to understand that the photographer said that I could not be in the picture because it was going to run in the Daily Dispatch, which is an Afrikaans paper, right, at the time. And so that is an example then. What hasn't changed, things have changed since then, but what hasn't changed is the makeup of the space, in that what I term the illusion of inclusion, right? So you put Tutu up on the stage, you put me up on the stage, you start, and there's this idea that all of a sudden now it is just very multicultural and everything's working. But that is not the case. So if I were to, run a dance company, theater company in South Africa right now, I mean, South Africa is a little different, but to here, I mean, I actually think in many ways South Africa's made more advances, to be quite honest. But it would really be to, vaudeville, like the French say, is from the people, right? So it's to let people know that this belongs to them. And I use the Met as an example, right? There's not a lot of people of color who go to see an opera at the Met. Doesn't mean they don't like opera, no, because every summer when the Met opens its season, they open it in Central Park. And people are there in their flip-flops and their shirts, and they're hanging out and they're listening to Anna Netrebko sing a gorgeous aria. And it's quite mind-blowingly beautiful. The problem is those same people won't feel comfortable going into the Met because of how it is being designed since eternity. The second thing is the truth. Is really like, a couple of years ago, Hal Prince's office had me go to Moscow, to Russia, to go and help this production. And all of the artists came up to me and they were like, they called me Chorny Vorin. And I was like, what the hell is that? And they were like, it means Black Raven. And they explained to me how, like, one of their heroes, the poet laureate of Russia, was Alexander Pushkin. And Pushkin was black. His grandfather was from Eritrea, which is next to Ethiopia. And I was so taken by how they were aware of that, and yet many Americans whom I work with were not. Similarly, in France, the author of The Three Musketeers, The Man with the Iron Mask, all of those great stories were written by, gosh, help me, Dirk. I'm blanking. It'll come to me.
Victor Hugo, no?
Not Hugo, no.
Dumas?
Say again?
Oh, yeah.
Dumas?
Alexander Dumas, there you go.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
Dumas' mom, he was from Haiti, and it's not that he wrote beautifully or that he wrote narratively well at the time, is that he wrote beautifully, and so he was in the king's castle, and the king was like, yeah, write for me, and then he went on to become a great author. So I think it's important for us to know our history and the truth. I wrote somebody in Cape Town recently, and I was like, I have a question. Was David Krugel, not David Krugel, David, Dirk, I'm getting old. Help me. K-Pab.
David, I'll tell you now.
Founder. David
Poole.
David Poole. I was like, was David Poole non-white? And I kind of got like a yes, no, he was not, because I remember growing up and my grandmother telling me that the day that David Poole left South Africa to go to London, she went to the harbor, or she went somewhere and she watched him. And she told me, she was like, he's a colored guy. And I was like, no, he's not. And so for me to like go on that journey, leaving South Africa, going to London, dancing, I was at Rombe, I was at, interacting with the Royal, and to know that David Poole, like, it was mind-boggling, because I was like, he came from where I come from, where I come from. And yet the narrative that people don't know is that David was not a white cat. And so I think it's a combination of understanding the truth of our history. I think it's the spaces that we're in. And I also think, I met Mtutuzeli when he was just leaving South. I met him in South Africa. We did a workshop together, and then I met him in London, and like we did a rehearsal together. I was helping him with something, and I remember being like amazed by his incredible ability of manipulating movement. It was just, he could immediately change something, and to me that was like not just an artistic intelligence, but really just an intelligence of how he wanted his body to do something in that moment that in itself told the story. And so I'm not surprised by the success that he's having, but I think is also to really zone in on that. I think the approach to artistry not being just in a methodical form of like, you know, you do Giacchetti or RAD, or I think there's an artistry that we're not allowing to bloom, because a lot of the times most people don't have that kind of technical ability, but they have so much more to give. And so I think as we look at our, you know, our training programs and how we run companies and so forth, that there's more a approach of less focusing on just the dictated technique of what previous generations have considered to be powerful, and really look at the whole thing.
I think you're touching on something very important. You know, one of our former presidents used to talk about South Africa having two economies, because we have a first world and a third world economy running side by side in South Africa. Well, now much less so than in the past, but definitely. And I think in many ways in dance the same is happening, is that we have a group of people that are, call them first world for lack of a better word, but we have a group of people that needs to play catch up, that has to do exactly what you are talking about, that has to be re-exposed, redeveloped, retrained, but given the freedom to be expressive, creative, and to take pride in who they are. And I think that that's something that again we know it in a way, but we are not getting it right yet. And I always talk from my own experience. I can only talk from my experience. My experience is my experience. I don't know your experience, which is why we have these conversations, because I want to get your experience. And I think that's something that is so important.
If I can jump in right there, imagine a dentist practicing the same way in 2000 as he or she did in 1980. Like,
we won't be happy, will we?
No, but think about it, right? Imagine a dentist going about the same, you know, whether you're getting an extraction or getting a filling or getting a crown, but imagine them doing it. I mean, they are constantly learning and iterating and improving and making better. So we have these dance companies and theater companies being run exactly the same way that they were for generations. Yeah. And it makes no sense. It makes it's mind-boggling. Like, every other industry you look around, they are constantly pivoting and evolving and making better and being more inclusive. Theater, strikingly, theater, I find, is more caught up in trying to hang on to something than they are about trying to move forward.
Casey, I'm going to give you a moment now, but I just wanted to say, we so often, we say, you know, we open-minded, and yet when a young child in a classroom says, I don't like this or something, we go, what do you know? And this is exactly what you are talking about, is that there's constantly need for renewal, need for change, need for, our younger generation is so different from what we were before. So that's what I want to say. Casey, your thoughts, and then we're going to get to you again, Mtutuzeli.
Yeah. Well, I think we always kind of run into this problem. We are sort of I only speak mainly for the classical ballet community. But yeah, we're very caught up in tradition, and we want to honor our tradition. I think there's a lot of tradition out there worth honoring and worth keeping. But we do get stuck very heavily quite often in keeping everything and saying, okay, this is the way it's always been done, so just do it that way. I think there's a lot of traditions worth keeping and worth preserving and maintaining and continuing to press on. But then there's also a lot of traditions that are just kind of useless, and we never really considered why we're maintaining those traditions. And so I think we as a community really need to dig in and say, okay, this is a tradition. Is this a good tradition to keep, or is this a tradition that we should probably really phase out very quickly? You know, there's a lot of those. But, you know, it's kind of hard also to say, okay, what's worth keeping and what's not worth keeping. And in the end, it is art. It's always changing. It's always different. You know, the way we dance now is not the same way we danced, at least in classical ballet, 50 years ago. You know, it has changed. It has evolved. So, you know, we need to always remember that things are continuing to evolve and change. And no matter how much we try to preserve them, you know, eventually we're going to, you know, move on and pass on. But I think there are a lot of big roadblocks that we could definitely move on from and move on from in a very quick way. And, you know, obviously, as I believe, inclusivity is a very big one. I think the community in the past has looked at it and gone, okay, wait, you know, that's obviously not right. We need to do something. But I think it's only been recently that we've really realized in its full entirety how much we need to really change and how much more we need to be to go out of our way to be more inclusive and to really create a community that everyone feels welcome into and doesn't feel like any kind of an outsider, things like that. But, you know, like everything, it does take time. It takes a lot of self-reflection. And the good thing is we're having that conversation, and COVID-19 has really brought it up and exposed a lot of these inequalities more so than even a lot of people realized. And I completely agree with you, Warren. You know, this is not a time to look back and say, okay, let's bring it back to normal. We do want normalcy. I think when people talk about normalcy, they're talking primarily about the income, you know, the ticket sales and the regular audience members and things like that. But obviously there's a lot of normalcy that we don't want to go back to. There's a lot of those traditions that we need to re-examine and say, okay, let's move on from that. Let's create better ways of doing things and be more innovative and be more inclusive and create a new era that we can all partake in. And it's really going to be better for everyone.
Exactly. I completely agree with that. Tutu, you?
There's such a broad conversation, and I think most of it has to do with approach, how people take approaches when it comes to things like this. Because 2 years ago, I gave a workshop at the Central School of Ballet, and I think sometimes people see me doing some neoclassical stuff online and they think that's all I can do. And I come in to teach a workshop and I just do African dance. So I gave these kids who happen to all be white some African dance classes. And in that moment, I thought to myself, I think sometimes we get so caught up in this idea that the ballet world does not want to accept us. And I think it is our duty to bring what we have and in a way disrupt what the ballet world, the doors that are closed by the classical form. Because I don't like to use ballet. I think just dance is so broad and it's so diverse on its own. And I think that the more that we allow our cultures to open up to other forms of dance and other forms of other cultures, the better the dance world or the industry will go forward. And this doesn't mean now suddenly all ballet companies should employ Black people and do African dance, but there's a space that is unexplored there, that the stories like the Nelson Mandela stories and like the Nina Simone's kind of stories, those stories are so beautiful. And those are the stories that our people need to be telling. We can use whatever form of dance we want to use, but it's just us knowing that we can do those things. And I think sometimes we wait for so long for other people to open doors for us instead of creating the doors. I kind of
think that's
lost
very
what we were
important. I'm going to
talking
interrupt
about.
you quickly. because
Yeah.
because I'll get back to that now. But I think also when I created the Bengingazi story, which mixed classical ballet, contemporary, and pantsula, I thought we were going to have a lot of resistance from the typical ballet audiences. And the first time I did a piece of it was in a gala in 2017, and then a little bit of an extended version of it in the 2018 International Ballet Competition. And I was truly amazed by the audience's reaction to it, thinking that they are typical pure classical ballet competition. They're coming to this audience. They're coming to a ballet competition. They are wanting to see ballet. And here I throw Pantsula by two troops, one from Alexandra, one from Soweto. And they did pure Pantsula in the show. And the audience absolutely loved it. And I think that sometimes we are not giving enough credit to our audiences, because the audiences watch TV, they interact, they see new movies, and they are starting to move ahead. And sometimes I think we lose our audiences, thinking that they are stuck in a generation past. And that's why the young people like yourselves being here are so important, because you are the ones that can now take it and run with it and create and be, sorry for saying this, the Michael Flatley of African dance. And the, do you understand what I'm saying, of like Joaquin Cortez took flamenco
But
dance
why?
and
But Derek,
truly
why are you
popularized it?
surprised?
Because I thought
Why were
that
you surprised that people?
because I thought people were still
What does contemporary mean?
of today,
What
of
does it mean?
now. Um,
It literally means of our time, right? And
yeah,
so when
exactly,
you
of
think about
now.
what people are watching on television or what they're listening to, it's like, the musical Hamilton, everyone's gone crazy about. It's like, oh, groundbreaking. Yes, it's groundbreaking in the venue of where it's being put, but hip hop's been around for a long time. And so people have been more attuned to listening to hip hop. People have been more attuned to, you walk in a mall, you hear hip hop. You put on your car radio, you hear hip hop. So all that Lynn did was he took the form and put it on stage. That's it. And so the
Exactly.
idea of Pansula is like people are seeing it in their commercials, in their music videos, they're watching it it's contemporary. And so again, this is where I struggle, is that the artists and the people are the ones that are trying to push through the door, right? Like, this is what we want to do. And on the other side of the door are audiences who are like, yes, come, please. But there's the door. And the door is the structure that I
Absolutely.
struggle with, which is like the
Yeah.
idea that, and as Casey was saying, there are improvements, and you do see things, but the improvements are happening on that side of the door and on this side of the door. And to answer your earlier question, I would never open a dance company because I would have to deal with that door. And I don't have I got 2 kids, man. I don't have time for that. It's like, you see what I'm saying? Like it's not a phenomenon. I'm not surprised that the audience jumped to their feet or that they were, because that's what they entertained by. It's beautiful to listen to a Rachmaninoff piece, of course, but Rachmaninoff was contemporary at his time. Swan Lake was booed the first time. They called Tchaikovsky a failure because he was contemporary at his time. He wasn't doing what the others were doing. Yeah. So similarly, Billy Forsyth was booed in Paris the first time the West saw his work because he was contemporary at his time. And so it's this constant need to deal with the people that are running the organizations or the buildings that want to hold on to a past.
Yeah, and you always have these purists. There's always that little section of purists, but generally speaking, dance audiences just love dance.
Yeah.
They want to see people dance, and whether it's classical ballet or whatever style, they love dance. And so I think audiences are much more sophisticated than we give them credit for sometimes.
Yeah, but you know, the interesting thing is that
What did you say?
dancers also, yeah, so dancers also long to dance. And I say this because I find that we get caught up in this idea of an image. And you walk into the studio and there's mirrors everywhere and you see yourself and you hear what people want you to be looking like. And I think sometimes this breaks this barrier of moving forward because you're so caught up in actually being obsessed with what the world is thinking of you. And what's been interesting in the last couple of months is that I've been stuck in this room by myself and I've just been dancing. And for the first time in about 10 years, I really, really love dance because it feels like how it used to feel when I was young because I'm not looking at anything. No one is looking at me. And I think sometimes this approach of what you should look like to be a dancer is something that should probably also change as well. Like Casey was saying that some things have always been like that. You know, if you do normal people jobs, I mean not artists, like other people jobs, and you walk in and you say something like oh that's there, and then they're like, oh no, don't worry, we've always done it that way. That idea in the Bali world completely needs to change. Absolutely. That it's always been like this, that does not propel anything forward. There's no change that happens there. And so I'm not saying that people should stop doing swan lakes, but you know, there's so much room and there's so much more to be done. And I think sometimes I'm trying to have these conversations about what inclusivity and diversity means, because for me, this conversation is diverse for me. We are diverse, but what inclusivity means somehow has a weird feel, because if we were all men, and which we are, and we're not including a woman in this panel, so we've already created this space that is for men, but because we feel bad, we want to include somebody else. And I feel that idea in that conversation is also something that needs to be had a lot more, and with thorough thinking, and really think about what those two things means: inclusivity and diversity. Because I don't
I
think,
want to jump on.
yeah.
Sorry, Tutu. I read something the other day that I want to jump on what you just said. I read something the other day. It was so beautiful. It said diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusivity is being asked to dance.
Yeah.
It's diverse. I'm telling you, I wrote this piece called "The Illusion of Inclusion." Diversity is the worst thing that ever happened to us, because diversity is just about appearances. You can make the security guard and the box office ticket holder diverse. You can make them other. But what functions once you go through the other side of the door does not have to, because now you've ticked the boxes, right? Real inclusivity. You're right. Like even on a panel of a discussion like this, and you know, it's sometimes when we are fixing one thing, we actually we don't realize that we are we are creating a problem elsewhere. So, and people go, oh, but it's so hard. It's, you know, it's never. Yeah, man, change is hard. Like it's supposed to be hard. Like if every time you are about to do something that you have to think. I was a part of a discussion recently, and a colleague of mine gave a speech, and she said, you know, right before you're about to cost something, look around the room and ask yourself, did I do the best job possible about including everyone? You know, several years ago, I was part of the team that built Toy Story the musical for Disney, Pixar. And I remember we were casting it, and we wanted the two kids to be played by girls, because they just had a much higher vocal range, and they also could sound younger. Whereas if you got, you know, male actors to play them, you'd be like, that's an old dude playing a kid. So we decided to cast them as girls, right? And so in Toy Story, you got Andy and you got Sid, and it's Andy is like it's his toys, and then Sid's like the bad kid, right? And we got to the casting of it, and I was sitting around the room, and I just remember them casting the black girl, who was incredible performer, singer, and dancer, as like the lead monkey, and then they had these two white girls playing Andy and Sid. And I remember thinking, and I was young at the time, I was like, oh, I'm so gonna get fired today. I was like, listen, I'm not casting a black girl as a monkey. Like, that's it. And she should be playing Sid because she's got that great rock sound. And I got up and left, and I was being young. And I came back, and they changed it to what I recommended. And I asked them why, and they said, oh, John Lasseter, who created Pixar, he said, you didn't ask me if they could be played by girls. Why would I care if they're black or white? And it's that idea of immediately people go to, again, the door, right? How is it normally done? It's like the dude made a show about toys. It doesn't matter who plays them, right? Like, but this is what I'm saying is we have our own, we have our own, we all play a part in this. I mean, I'm guilty of it. A few months ago, I directed the show, and I didn't look at the band, and all of a sudden it's a day of tech, and 8 musicians walked out, and they're all men. And I was like, this is, like, that's my fault, So we all play a part in that. We all have to look at it and go, every time we make a decision, are we doing the best we can? And this is not about lowering the bar. This is not about saying, oh, let's be diverse. This is about making sure that outside that door, people are knocking, and they are incredible musicians. They're incredible performers, incredible dancers, actors. Have we seen all of them? And if the answer is no, then you haven't done the best.
Well, I completely agree with you. And I think this is something that I feel very strongly about, is the fact that, if you think of Mao's Last Dancer, the fact that people go out and find the talent, and they don't wait for the talent to come to them, because already you're excluding a whole load of people, because some people don't even know they have the talent. So that's one of the things I want to I just wanted to put out there. Tutizeli, you sent us a short clip of your work, very, very short. So tell us a little bit about that before Lauge is going to play it for us.
So I like now, a couple of years ago, there was a lot of this kind of talk, black and white and green and yellow. And sometimes I filter these things when I see them on social media. But what I failed to understand was that my soul and my mind and my heart was hurting as a young black man. And so when I was presented with this opportunity to create a work, I was inspired by a painting by a South African painter called Gerard Sekoto. And he created this beautiful piece of work called Song of the Pig. And it's basically these men that are working and they're picking. And there's this strange white man in the corner wearing this bright yellow suit. And I looked at this image, and what Gerard Sekoto is known for is to paint his works like he uses beautiful colors. And these men looked like they were working really hard, but the picture looked so lookable. And I thought to myself, those were not the real colors at that time. And what would it feel like to paint those real colors, to paint the struggles of those men that were working, but also reflecting on what just recently happened in the mine strikes in South Africa in 2012 in Marikana, what the women went through when it comes to their losing their husbands being injured just simply by fighting for better, so all these things just came into one little bowl, and I just needed to do something. So I created this piece called Ingoma. Ingoma means song, and basically, in my opinion, in my mind, this is a song I wanted to sing for them, and so we made this work.
Let's see it. Oi,
um,
oi. Tell us quickly. We're gonna have to finish shortly. But tell us about
yeah.
the music, the dancers. Just tell us
So that
more.
what you just saw is the company I dance for, Ballet Black, incredible company of 8 dancers, directed by Casa Pancho. And the music is created by a friend of mine and myself, called Peter Johnson. And you know what was interesting about this was how the two worlds, the ballet world and my African world, they don't sit that far apart. And so when I had to ask these women to wear point shoes to do this work, I had to rethink about what does this body wants to do if it were to wear point shoes. And they such great percussion kind of shoes, like they make such great sounds. And so in the African dance, there's a lot of groundedness and a lot of rhythms. So I approached all these different ideas, and we toured it around the UK, and we took it to Italy, and we took it to Germany. And with my surprise, it was nominated for 2 awards, for an Olivier Award and for Dance Critics Award. And what's amazing for me was that I wanted to tell my story, and knowing that this story is a diverse story, that everyone knows what it feels like when you're dealing with injustice, and how difficult it is to do your absolute best. And these women and men, every single show, they would be in tears, because when you I'm getting emotional. But when you work so hard in a place that does not want to open its doors for you, it is awful. And I wanted to create this work to sing to those men and say, thank you for what you've done, because we are able to be here today and have these discussions about these kind of things. And we owe it to all of the people that have fought for us. And that's what Ingoma is.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Oi.
We might have lost Dirk for a moment.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, there we are.
Oi. Wow, it's an amazing piece. Sorry, guys, I lost you for a moment, and welcome back. I just think it's spectacular. I would love for it to be in South Africa past COVID. So part of the new normal is that it has to come to South Africa, please. Let's just to finish off, because it's 8 o'clock in South Africa. Each one of you, if you had to be speaking to a young male dancer somewhere in the world, what would you say to them? If you had to speak to a parent saying, oh, I'm not sure if my child should be doing this, what should you say to them to encourage them to continue supporting them, making it happen? Let's find the next Ntutu, the next Warren, the next Casey, the next Michaela de Prince, the next Andile Ndlovu, Boyce Kobe, Lira Mokhatle, the next. What would you say to them? Let's start with you, Casey. And then also, this is your goodbye. And Lauga, I would love to play out again with that piece of choreography to finish off for us at the end of all of this, please. So if you just can get it ready again. Casey.
Well, I mean, I always, my biggest thing with people is to always tell them to go with what they're passionate about. There's a future in this. It's painful to see all these people saying, "Oh, is dance going to survive? Is ballet going to survive?" Of course, it's going to survive. It's going to change a lot, and as we've been talking about, it needs to change. I'm looking at this whole situation thinking this is, of course, pretty tragic. We're looking at a lot of people facing hard times, a lot of arts organizations, a lot of artists facing hard times. But what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and that's a fact. We grow better from facing adversity and challenges. And so look at this period as a learning period, as a growing period, as a changing period. Arts will survive, as Warren was saying earlier. I mean, we all know it. But it's going to change, and it's going to change in a good way. So stick with it. You know, if it's your passion, go for it. Don't do anything else. You know, go for what you're passionate about, because you'll eventually be good at it. And don't worry about whether it's going to be there or not in a few years. It'll be there. It's going to change, but don't let this short-term period. Don't let short-term things affect you so heavily. Look at the long game. Look down the road a little bit further and see where things are going, and your passion will guide you. Stick with it.
Thanks, Casey, and may Ballet Rising go from strength to strength. Warren, your last thoughts. Oh, your microphone is off, Warren.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry.
No, I said I have 3 quick one-liners, which is, it is a journey, not a destination. Thank your teachers, and if you are thanking them, thank them more. And 3, you'll have to come back to me. I'm getting old.
Let's give Tutu a turn, and then if it comes back to you.
Oh man!
And I'm the old one here.
No,
Let's
man,
go,
listen,
Tutu.
I've been up since 5 o'clock, man. I've been up since 5. So keep going.
I think for me, I would say to the parents, the first thing I would say is allow your children. Allow your children, just that word allow, like give them the chance, give them the space for them to know that they can. And for a young Mtutuzeli, I would say try and always be true to yourself, because no one is you in the world. No one else is you. And I think I say that because that's the way I was brought up. I was allowed to try things, and I allowed myself to say the truest as I possibly can to whom Tutuzeli is. And I think if you combine those two things, hopefully something could change.
Super. Thank you very much, Tutu.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Warren hasn't come back to me.
I remember the last thing, which is, I think you said specifically to young male dancers. I just remember as a young man, my mother said to me, when running into either bullying or that kind of thing, is that she said, they're laughing at you because you're different. You should be laughing at them because they're all the same. And so I would just say, embrace your being different.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you, gents. It really, really has been great. Ladies and gentlemen, next week we have Rachel Moore, the former executive director of American Ballet Theatre, now the CEO of the Los Angeles Music Center. We have Samuel Vuerten, the director of the Holland Dance Festival. And we have Derek Dean, the super choreographer, director of companies, now artistic director of the Shanghai Ballet, that will be joining us. So it's a really, really great group of people that we will have next week. Thank you very much for everybody, for your time, your 3 gents. I really, really appreciate it. I really hope that something will come from this. Lauge, thank you for being behind the scenes and keeping everything running for us. And let's play out with Mtutu's choreography. I love it. Thank you so much, gents. Take care of yourself.
Take care.
Thank you.
Ciao.